I'd like to thank you all for being here for today's session, part of IANA's Advancing Intermodal program. Today, we're going to focus on 3PLs and the role they play in connecting the various stakeholders in the intermodal supply chain. This session is part of our Intermodal University series, so I'd like to take a moment to say a special hello to the students and those who are new to the industry who are joining us for today's discussion. I'd like to welcome Shelley Austin, President of InTech Freight and Logistics. She is also Chair of IANA's Board of Directors, and Tim Humbert, who is Vice President of North American Intermodal for C.H. Robinson, and he is also a member of IANA's Board of Directors. So thank you both for being with us today, and Tim, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you may be located today. I'm pretty excited about the opportunity here to represent IANA, the organization of IANA and all of its members, in addition to our fellow board members, and excited to be sharing this time with Shelley today. So we'll do a couple brief introductions before we get into content, which is really just going to be a guide for discussion and hopefully get the opportunity to have some Q&A at the end with everybody. So really quick, who I am and where I came from. As mentioned, I'm Vice President of North American Intermodal at C.H. Robinson. This was not when I first got into this business, it was not the chosen career. I actually have a teaching degree from Illinois State University and finished my master's at Purdue just here in the last 6 years or so. But my roles are pretty diverse. Most of it spent inside of intermodal of my 23-year career at Robinson. Of doing all things of capacity and procurement and leading our intermodal division, but took a couple years out of intermodal and worked on dedicated drop trailer program at C.H. Robinson. So in a nutshell, that's it. But encourage and welcome all connections on LinkedIn. We can get a little bit more diverse in background and follow-up. With that, I'll turn it over to Shelley for a brief introduction.
Thank you, Tim. So welcome, everybody. Excited to be able to talk with you today. It's similar to Tim. So I'm Shelley Austin, President of InTech Freight and Logistics, based here in Indianapolis, Indiana, the very cold Indianapolis today. And I obviously, with my background, couldn't decide what I wanted to do with my career because I went to a few different schools. Tim mentioned that he didn't didn't decide he wanted to play with planes, trains, and automobiles from the beginning, and neither did I. I actually started out with theater technology at Butler and then decided to make a change. Graduated with my business degree at IUPUI and then still decided to keep on punishing myself and went for my logistics degree at Penn State. Have had a few different opportunities with, the transportation in my past. I used to be on the seller side of the business, and that was with BrightPoint. We were the largest wireless distributor. Then I spent some time in China with Buzztronics and working with their warehousing and transportation. And then on into IDS, which morphed into where we're at now at InTech Freight and Logistics. And, we're a 3PL that focuses mostly on the transportation side of things and a very high focus on intermodal. So we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, so I think part of today's session and informative session and education session is what is the value of a third-party logistics company and really what are some of the roles that we play and what are some of the options and roles that we as individuals can make a profession out of this and a career out of it and how it can be very rewarding in the same breath. But kind of before we kind of get into, what is a 3PL and what is the value that we bring to our customers and carriers and vendors and suppliers and all those across the supply chain, just kind of a visual for everybody here that I borrowed from C.H. Robinson that talks about this overall universe of complexity that makes up supply chain, where it's the real simple stuff of, hey, trucks and railroads and airlines and cargo and ocean carriers and LTL carriers that are really bringing goods to the shelves for us as consumers to go purchase. And there's tremendous value in what they do for us across the supply chain. But kind of blended with all that are a fair amount of what can become pretty complex mousetraps about how we build a supply chain. the technology and innovation that supports it, the data that drives it, the insights that brings. What does this mean from digitalization of supply chain, of expectations of customers? For those of us that have been around in the business for a little while, 10 years ago, it was like, oh, we're going to have 2 or 3 day shipping. And now we click on a button and it's here the same day or next day. And so that evolution and how we navigate that on behalf of customers and ultimately the consumer is huge. The great thing about this business is it's really big. It's a really big industry, but a small world, if that makes sense. So a lot of us know each other and have a lot of relationships across these various specs. The other value of it is there's plenty of opportunities to build a career in the middle of all this. And I think Shelley's going to touch on that a little bit later in the presentation about what that means. But just a visual for everybody here to see from the global side to what we do here in North America and beyond, there's a lot of inputs and pieces to what makes up a supply chain. And Shelley, anything you want to add to that before we flip to the next one?
No, I think globally that's great, Tim. And we'll just kind of jump to the next slide and we'll kind of dig down a little bit more into the weeds of a 3PL. The way I describe a 3PL is it's pretty much anything. You've got 3PLs, you've got 4PLs, it's an infinite number, and it's almost like the buzzword of logistics. What is logistics? Well, logistics could be just about anything to whoever is talking about it. So the way we kind of see a 3PL is it's outsourced services for storing things and shipping things. It can be from the procurement level, all the transportation, and that transportation line item there is just, it has so many different pieces and parts to it, to where it can be trucking, it can be ocean, it can be air, it can be a car, it can be anything in the transportation segment that is part of a 3PL. We've got warehousing, transloading, and fulfillment and cross-dock. So all of these parts and pieces come together in a 3PL environment. And I always kind of look at it as kind of like the puppet master to all the different things and keeping everything working in sync, to where the end goal is to make sure that the customer doesn't have to worry about all these things. That's really where we 3PLs kind of have risen above and become the heroes, as you'll see as we work through the rest of this presentation. But we're there to make things easy for the customer, to take all those worries away, to find solutions when they don't have the time to find solutions. And that's what makes our job exciting. It is not the same thing every day. Absolutely not. And so it changes all the time. And that's what is really good about the opportunities that are involved within a 3PL. It can be a single source, or it can be a bundle of a bunch of different sources. Tim mentioned that, this is a huge industry and we all kind of know each other. Well, here's the funny thing about it is we may compete in a certain sense, but we also work together for solutions. So that's the odd thing about this industry, is that you really don't want to burn any bridges, because one day you may be competing against, Tim and I may be competing on a new opportunity. But then tomorrow I'll be calling Tim and saying, hey, you do this really, really well, and we need that help here. So let's work together and let's find a solution for our customer. So that's the cool thing about 3PLs, is having that flexibility and that ability to do that. The only other thing that I'll talk about is it's not limited, right? So you've got domestic U.S. opportunities with 3PL. Cross-border is huge for 3PLs. And then you also have the international, the global aspect. So there's a lot of things that are involved in this, what I call a huge puzzle, and putting those puzzle pieces together. Tim, did you have anything to add?
I don't think I can say it any better around this. Reiterate the point around simplicity for the customer. Ultimately, the beneficial cargo owner, or the owner of goods, manufacturer, or end user of goods is why we exist, to make their life simple and ultimately smooth out the ups and downs that the market may give us in the supply chain. It's impacted by so many things across the globe, of economic factors to policy factors to all that. And our job is to say, we have that for you under control. Let's just continue to work on getting product to shelf in its most simple form, so we can continue down the path.
Absolutely.
So if you could flip the next slide, this is just kind of a little bit more of a visual how some of those things come together. Again, borrowing from my organization at C.H. Robinson, where the mantra, and I don't think those are information, I don't know if it's unique, that we're solving complex challenges on behalf of our shippers. And we as third parties are using this information to gather data and have data drive insights, and insights to solutions. And ultimately, we do that on behalf of our customers very collaboratively to solve what the newest, latest, and greatest challenge is. As much as we love and strive for no hiccups in our day or no hiccups in that manufacturing line, or if we're running intermodal product across country on thousands of miles of an outdoor manufacturing line or a track. We think about ice storms and weather events in the South today, in Texas and Tennessee and some other places. Those are the types of things that we have to smooth that out. And then we bring that together and find the right mode of service to really support that customer ask and that need, whether that is truckload or intermodal or ocean or air, depending on all the factors that our customers present us with. So it is an ecosystem, but reiterating the value of the third party is we bring that very complex system down to apply. This is how we can solve your challenge. This is how insights lead to outcomes and very workable, manageable solutions on behalf of the client. So with that, I'll hit the pause button. If Shelley has anything to add, if not, we'll turn it back over to her.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Tim. We'll go on to the next slide. And what we're looking at here is, it was mentioned stakeholders. And stakeholders, really, that's the key, right? But there's so many different stakeholders in what the 3PLs touch and what this again, another buzzword, supply chain encompasses. And so as we look through this, we'll kind of go through these stakeholders, but to go through these stakeholders, really what I want to mention is some real life examples to really give you a hands-on of what a 3PL really is and what it can do. So as I walk through this, us as an organization here, we can touch all of these stakeholders, or we can only have certain parts of it and just work through it. But as I mentioned, in regards to us being kind of the link between all of these and helping it all work seamlessly. So let's take an example that we're all familiar with, that a lot of our commodities, a lot of things that we use are overseas, right? So you wouldn't think immediately that a 3PL is working with overseas, but let's just take, for example, a 3PL helps coordinate with the forwarders on picking up overseas from the ocean. So then you've got the manufacturers that are overseas, and let's just take shoes, for example. I know everybody loves shoes and got to get some new ones all the time. So we've got some shoes that are overseas in there in the manufacturers. Your 3PL is going to coordinate and help get those on the container and on the ship. And then you've got to track and manage and watch that. So who's going to do the tracking for the customer? Well, there you go. There's the 3PL. The 3PL is going to do the tracking. But the manufacturer is a stakeholder, right? Because if you don't pick it up on time, then they're stuck with a burden on their side. So you've got to make sure everything works in sync. So then when we get onto the steamship lines and the ports, you still have that visibility. Well, here's another thing you'll hear us talk about. 3PLs have to be really, really good at technology, because we have to help make sure that the customer, the end customer, and the manufacturer, they're all have visibility of what's going on. So that's where the steamship lines, they're a stakeholder, and the ports where the containers come in, they're a stakeholder as well, because the ports don't want to be burdened by these things not getting off of their dock while they're out of the port. So then 3PLs are coordinating the trucking to get to the port, to get them out of the port so that there's not congestion and backups in the ports. At the same time, you can't get it out of the port unless the custom brokers and the forwarders are working together to clear the freight, because then you've got all this customs issues. And we're touching all of these parts and pieces. Now you're to the truckers and the rail and the drayage, which is a critical piece of 3PL work and what we're dealing with on the supply chain. So you have to work with the truckers, and you have to make sure that they have the right certifications, that they have everything that's needed to get into a port and out of a port, or into a rail ramp or out of a rail ramp. So these are the things, and the truckers are stakeholders, because they're not going to want to be burdened by all of a sudden they go to the port to pick up and something wasn't cleared, and now they're stuck, and then they've got driver hours. And so the 3PLs have to make sure they've done what they need to do, working with the brokers to get them cleared. And then on the same side, if it's going into the rail, the 3PLs have to make sure they've rail billed, they've done all this stuff so the truckers aren't stuck at the ramp. Now we keep going. Let's just say that we're not moving all the way on the rail, and then we need to transload. Well, then you've got warehouses that are involved in this. And a lot of us 3PLs, we work with warehouses, and we have that information as well. And they're a stakeholder, because anything that goes wrong in this process could back up what they do, their efficiencies and their labor. As I continue to go down the chain, stakeholders, big stakeholders, the customer. We're all trying to make the customer happy. We're here to be the hero for the customer and make this all work out well for them. But what for the end goal, and who is the largest stakeholder? You, the end consumer. we do all this. We started out overseas for these shoes, and then ultimately it ends up to where you're going to want to purchase these. But what if they're not on the shelves? What if they're not available in the supply chain, and you're sitting there wondering where your next Air Jordans? I know that's not popular anymore, but I'm dating myself. Let's just say Air Jordans still are, and you don't have the next Air Jordans. I mean, you, the end consumer, is the ultimate stakeholder in everything we do in the 3PL. Tim?
I'll add one comment that I still like to think Air Jordans are popular, but that's just being a Chicago guy. Probably no more than that. And I do have a pair or two myself. But I think the key to this is there's this, just that example is fantastic. That highlights the number of stakeholders that have a vested interest of goods and services from point A to point B. And the value that we bring as the third party is for those customers that choose a third party solution. These are the things that are happening behind the scenes that you don't. Referencing an old commercial, it's the easy button. And we can be the easy button for a lot of these complexities and solve these challenges with our networks and with our stakeholders and people that we contract with on your behalf. So I think that's the value of the third party. Is there are some customers and beneficial cargo owners that are very complex and very robust supply chain and transportation departments, and there's a need and there's a lot of value in that. And then there's others that really rely on this third party model to bring these things together and or some expertise in one of these spaces to create or enhance their supply chain outcome. So that's about all I have to add to it.
Excellent. Well, we'll jump to the next slide. So I put that all in a nice little fine little fashion in line of how things are supposed to work. But here's the kicker. It rarely works like that. And that's where 3PLs are pretty strong too, because our, where our strength is and what we should be skilled at is how are we nimble and how do we move and flex when things just don't go the way they're supposed to go. And honestly, folks, I'm sure you're well aware, but for the last how many years, things have not gone the way they're supposed to go. So let's look at that really nice supply chain and let's talk about some of the obstacles that we could face with them. And maybe we can even talk about some ways that we handle those obstacles. So as we all know that we, on those obstacles, we have global challenges, right? So what's the biggest one that everybody can think of? Well, the pandemic I would consider in a global challenge. And so we went from nobody could get capacity for anything, and we were moving cargo in, retired onion boxes that it had vents that we had to pull out of retirement to move cargo. And anybody would grab anything for whatever price was possible to get it moving. And during the pandemic, we all know that there are issues with things being available on the shelves and all those types of things. So what do 3PLs do in that situation? Well, they don't rest on what they know and what they've always done in the past. They just come up with something different. So, we, again, would come up with different things we would use. When we used to use containers, we'll use trailers. If we used to use 53s, we'll use 40s. If we were going, air, but we needed to go a different mode, we would do something ocean versus that, we would just do all kinds of different things. And that was our decision and our opportunity to help the customers be able to find those different solutions. As we look at the other challenges, we all know that weather's a challenge. We'll think about the different things that are challenges with weather. Freezing. We have beverage customers. Well, you normally can move beverage customers without any temp control. But what happens when the temperatures get down to freezing? You got to look at that, because then you can't have things sitting out there. You can't have the possibility of something freezing up and not being good on the other end when it arrives. Vice versa. When it gets too hot, think about things that you wouldn't think needed to be protected, but there's things that melt. A good example is like vitamins, right? Gummy vitamins. You don't want it to come in a big old clob in the bottle, although I have to tell you, it still does sometimes. But it's our job to try and protect that and offer the right solutions for these challenges that we run into. Tim, you deal with such a large organization, and I know that regulations is a huge one that you have to look into. So tell us a little bit about kind of the maneuvers and different ways that you handle those types of obstacles.
Yeah, I think regulatory is a very broad scope inside of the arena of transportation and supply chain, and that broad scope can be anywhere from the impacts to motor carriers about what that means for compliance in something like hours of service at its very high level. Some of that could be some environmental regulatory impacts that recently in the news recently or the last couple of years has been around. California's been leading the charge on green trucks or more carb reduction outputs from from trucks in the state of California and other places. And so how those things stack up, what does that mean for the customer? What does that mean to cost and budget challenges? It's in the middle of all that is a big thing. Robinson is very fortunate from that perspective, where we do have a full-time government affairs person to help guide us through regulation and guide us through impacts to the business and our customers. But I would tell you, it moves on a regular basis, that there's rules and rulemaking and policy making on a regular basis. And we need to understand how that impacts at federal level, if that's customs compliance as an example, and customs laws as it relates to how you get to and from and across the border, to state regulatory laws and what that mean for a specific state. So regulatory environment's big, and having expertise or having access through a network that can create answers or insights about how those things are interpreted are pretty important.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our job, Tim, is we just have to communicate, right? Our customers are expecting us to be the first to know these things and be the first one to bring that information to them, so they're not caught off guard if something's going to disrupt the supply chain of their commodities. And that's really hard when it comes to regulations, because as Tim mentioned, it's always changing, it's ever changing. So we have to be in front of it. The other thing, and as I mentioned, if you've got competition, but you also work together, well, there's continual added competition within the 3PL environment. People are popping up everywhere offering 3PL services. And so that kind of just floods the market with all these different services. And it really is up to the customer to vet out who they're working with to make sure that they find somebody that fits their business needs and fits what they need as solutions. The only other thing that I'll mention, Tim and I put this together on both sides, right? I mean, technology and automation, it can be an obstacle, but it can also be an opportunity. So let's talk about the obstacles for technology and automation. Personally, in my opinion, I'm huge for technology, absolutely love it. But I also will say that, in my opinion, technology is only as good as strong people behind it, because I don't think we'll ever get rid of the human. Well, I hate to say we'd ever get rid of the human factor of what makes 3PLs phenomenal and excellent at what they do. But we do have to stay in front of the technology to make sure that we have that good level of technology that fits the needs of the customers. The other thing that technology and automation can be an obstacle on it is technology, and so certain things could go wrong. And if people just trust what they see and what they're learning in technology, sometimes there could be a glitch and there could be an issue that if there's not a person behind to resolve that, then we could have some challenges there. So my favorite explanation when it comes to obstacles is the game whack-a-mole. I feel like we all are very professional athletes in playing the game whack-a-mole, and it is like literally we knock down one challenge and we're into the next, and we knock down another one and we're into the next, and if we even stop for a moment, we have lost the game. So Tim, what do you think? And if you want to jump into some of the opportunities, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think I love the whack-a-mole reference. It's ironic we bring it up in this presentation. It's kind of like the reliving the last 2.5 years specifically about what you're going to walk into every day. But if we think about this obstacle opportunity thing, I kind of want to carry on to the technology automation piece, and maybe an additional spin to it of it's an investment. And I think the investment needs to be carefully reviewed about how that investment that you make up front evolves with you as a customer or with you as the tool you want it to be. It has to fit to what your needs are in your business, and understanding that. I kind of related a little bit to buying a phone. Whoever makes the phone, whether that's iPhone or Samsung or insert thing here, they release a new phone every year for a reason, and so that technology has to evolve, right? And you buy a new computer every year for a reason, or there's a new Windows thing for a platform for a reason. And that's how quickly it is evolving inside of this transportation and logistics space, that there is some great tools out there, but those tools need to evolve with us. So just, as much as it can be a big investment, and that could be an obstacle up front, we have to look at it as an opportunity about what that means long-term to support our business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We talk about new service offerings, Tim, and a lot of that drives from technology, right? On the new service offerings. And how fun is it to be in a 3PL when you have no limits, right? I mean, yes, you have regulations you have to follow, but you have no limits of what different services you can create and what you can offer the customers. And, I think about all the different things that come about in the supply chain or in transportation. And guys, we're looking at these little drones that are hovering around and dropping packages everywhere. I mean, there are so many new things. And now Tim and I are trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to have technology to figure out how we manage the tracking and tracing of drones? It's amazing what you get into in this industry and what you can grow into and be on the cutting edge of all these new service offerings.
Yeah, I think I would sum that up with, innovation is the growth opportunity. And so the industry is always in need of people that are creative and people that want to think about things differently and people that want to look at an old idea and make it new again. That aligns with the evolution of transportation and supply chain and what that means. And I think I'll add one more thing as it relates to the opportunity. It kind of buttons up maybe a couple of these things on that opportunity platform. And it wouldn't be me without saying as part of IANA on Intermodal Association to say, these new service offerings or how technology supports that we can measure this is around sustainability. And then sustainability in our business has been a big thing for a handful of years now. It's gotten bigger, very big here recently. And there's tremendous value when we think about sustainability in transportation and logistics and the impact of that carbon footprint. But intermodal creates tremendous value to a supply chain on its relative to some other modes, its value it can bring in sustainability and carbon footprint. So, it's something we look at. There's technology tools and indicators and measurements of success and things that a lot of third-party platforms or even some of our suppliers and vendors in the space have to measure that. And that by itself, right, an initiative to look at our carbon footprint, about what that means from a customer level, what that means to a supplier level, how do we measure that, and then what are avenues to support that. That started with a need, continue with innovation. Technology supports it, measures it, and then we continue to make progressions across our business over time. And I'm speaking briefly for Shelley, but I'm sure I know for our organization, there's several of our customers that have pretty clear sustainability goals. And these types of tools and offerings of the third-party space can bring a lot of value to help measure that collaboratively with them.
Absolutely, Tim. I couldn't have said it any better. And one of the things that, and Tim mentioned IANA, and one of the things that I think is really huge in the 3PL space is, and it also carries out into IANA, is the network development. Hey, we talk about all these fun things we get to do in this industry, and we get to play with all these tools and technology and all those different things, but there's nothing left, that is any better than the network that you can develop. And we call this such a big industry, but it's very, very small too. We have all of these groups that are together in the 3PL and this network where it's like a family or a fraternity or a sorority. Can you tell I went with my son today to visit a college? It is so cool, the group that you can connect with in a 3PL. And what's best about that is kind of what I speak to is being the hero for your customer, because the way to be heroes for your customer is to be that Oz behind the curtain. And you may not have the tool within your own house or within your own capabilities, but the network that you develop, you can get the answer no matter which way you go. You just have to connect with one of your coworkers or your what could be a competitor, but as a partner, you got to connect with people and you got to get the answer. And once you get the answer, you can still be that hero for your customer. And I think that is so valuable. I don't know too many industries or too many opportunities that have that ability to be able to connect with so many people and have so many different solutions.
So I think that kind of wraps up some of our prepared content or commentary on some of this fun stuff, except for we're going to let Shelley maybe highlight what does that mean for maybe our audience or those that will listen to this recording down the line about what's out there from a career and professional perspective that's in front of us.
Yeah, so this is where it's really exciting for me, okay? So if I'm acting like a kid in a candy shop, I'm sorry, but I told you 3PLs can be anything, right? So you can go to school or not go to school or go to do a trade or whatever it is, and I guarantee you there's a job for you in a 3PL. I mean, there are so many different things. For instance, people wouldn't think engineers would be part of a 3PL, but absolutely. We talked a little bit, we touched just a smidge on warehousing, but think about this very vast supply chain that I mentioned. And one of the big things is figuring out what is the most efficient way to move something through that supply chain. And when you look at warehousing sounds so simple, but it's not. I mean, that you have to be able to set up different racking, different scenarios. How is it going to move through the warehouse most efficiently? So you've got engineering. The other thing that I think is extraordinarily cool, and I wish I was smart enough to be in it deeper, is data analytics. There is so much data analytics involved within a 3PL and decision making and economics and so on and so forth that you could just go crazy with all the technology and be able to slice and dice all the data. There's the standards that we talk about that everybody knows when they think about a 3PL. You've got the trucking, you've got the transportation, you've got warehouse management, you've got operations. But think about the things that other, legal. Again, something I don't really love to play a part of because I'm not that smart, but legal is a huge piece within the 3PL. You have to understand what those regulations are that Tim talked about. You have to know exactly what you can and cannot do. And so there's a huge place for that within the 3PL environment. And then sales and marketing. Hey, we wouldn't be here if we didn't have awesome sales and marketing, right? That's kind of the key of where we are able to connect up with our customers. And so it's exciting to see what happens in that world. I will tell you some of the developments that I've seen just internally here at Intech within our marketing division. I would have thought, hey, I'll be honest with you. At first I like marketing. Yeah. Oh, it really works and it's awesome. So I think that is a great opportunity to go into marketing. You have the sky is the limit when you're in a 3PL and what you can do for that. Tim, anything that I didn't highlight that, you have such a large organization. I'm sure there are a ton of things that I didn't even talk about that you guys work with at C.H. Robinson.
No, I think you nailed it. You kind of nailed a couple of my soft spots. And one of those is that data analytics or data scientists and things that those folks can do that to support everything. It's out of this world. Something we didn't see not too long ago. And now it's front and center in a bunch of things we do across the business. So pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, I think we've covered a ton of what 3PLs do. I would love to have some question and answers. This is our favorite part, interaction. So, Beth?
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking us through all of that information. That was a great start. And we do have some questions here for you. Tim, I'm going to start with the point that you were making about sustainability. And you were talking about how intermodal in general, very sustainable. Are you finding that the customers are coming to you with sustainability as a concern and are seeking you out for that? Or is that something that you're able to bring to the customers as an additional value add with what you're doing?
Well, I think it's both. Honestly, I think some customers have developed through their own channels very specific sustainability goals across their organization. That's not necessarily just supply chain, but it's across their organization. And how does transportation contribute to that as a selection? And I think there's other customers that, as this evolves and different scales and sizes and scopes in their journey, that they're looking for additional value adds to their organization and what that means. And this might be something we talk about when we think about intermodal is, hey, there's, here's the value and the commitment that comes with that and the service and associated that we can bring to the table. But hey, here's this other thing too, as you continue on your journey of a carbon footprint, here's what this means on that. So I think, each customer interaction rests on its own merit as it relates to that conversation. I'm confident in saying that there's more of them happening today than there was yesterday, but where they all begin is still a unique position.
Excellent. Very interesting. Very interesting. Shelley, you had talked about the stakeholders. You had laid out the stakeholders. When an interaction with a 3PL with whatever shipment the 3PL is working on, does that usually start with the shipper or the BCO, or might that process for you start with any of those stakeholders along the way?
That's a great question. Yes, it can be any of the stakeholders. I would say traditionally, Usually it starts with the BCO or the shipper, but think about in regards to when something goes wrong, as I mentioned in that process, if something goes wrong, then we have a new front runner that comes into play that we may need to do a whole nother branch off of it and do another solution to try and fix kind of what happened wrong in that normal process. And that then creates a new stakeholder and a new initiation that we work with somebody. Could be a new customer or new ship, a new BCO, but it could not be. So for instance, we have truckers call us all the time, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm stuck on this load, and I can't. What am I going to do with it? I need to get it off. I need to cross dock it. I need to do something. Do you have anything that can help me?" Bam, we're right in there. We find a warehouse, we help cross dock, we help move it. Now we've helped the trucker out of their situation. And so it can be initiated from any part of that chain of different stakeholders that we spoke about.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Wonderful. Tim, anything to?
No,
okay.
All good.
Excellent. So I'll throw this out to both of you. So there is a lot of volatility in what's going on. There's a lot of volatility during the pandemic. Do you think that is part of the reason that customers are turning to 3PLs for guidance to get that assistance with that volatility? Or do you think there are other reasons and that's just one of the pieces for customers to be turning to 3PLs?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. Maybe I'll take a stab at it, Shelley, and then you can chime in. I think customers, and it's going to range depending on who you are and what vertical you're in, right? If you're in food and beverage or paper or manufacturing or automotive, there can be a lot of variables in this response. But I think customers look to third parties for areas of expertise or validation of their own expertise, and volatility enhances that. And to be, at least from this lens, we're not looking for big disruptions and volatilities in the world around us. Sometimes it's just happening. But when that happens, that's where, kind of referencing some of the earlier content, our network and our connections inside the third-party space across those various stakeholders allow us to create insights and perspectives so the customers can make informed decisions. And I think that's part of the value. Now, if we're selected to execute on some of those perspectives, that's even better, right? That's why we're in business and why we do what we do. But there's a lot of value in that consultation, where customers are really good about their business. That doesn't mean they have to be really good about everything that exists across the third-party space.
Yeah, I agree with Tim very much on that. The only thing I think I'd add, Beth, is what I've seen, or what I think we've seen, or with the challenges that we've experienced the last few years. Customers have seen what 3PLs can do, and they maybe didn't know that before. So for instance, some of the strengths of a 3PL are that it doesn't matter what mode, or it doesn't matter what in the intermodal space, it doesn't matter what railroad. So for instance, let's just say that the railroads were struggling, which they were a while back with a potential strike. And so customers, if they're with a 3PL, they know, well, okay, my 3PL can take care of truck if there's a disruption on rail, and I don't have to go find new providers to help me with truck, because they can just jump to having that efficiency and proficiency that way. Likewise, if there's a challenge with a customer that says, my warehouse is completely full, but I keep shipping in product, what am I going to do? And so, a 3PL can say, well, we can set up an overflow warehouse for you, an offsite warehouse, just during, temporarily. And so we can get things unloaded and we can get it off the docks, or off the containers, which are causing dwell, which are causing charges, and kind of do that type of solution for you. So I think, as Tim mentioned, the 3PLs have the ability to be flexible and kind of shift when things are challenging, and it's always a different challenge. It doesn't matter, there's always going to be a different challenge. And so we have the ability to be flexible. Whereas if you're with an asset provider that's only on a specific service, then that makes it more challenging, because if something happens with that one, now you've got to go source and find another service or provider. So whereas a 3PL should be able to take care of that for you, and the customers can continue to do what they do best, manufacturing or distribution or selling, or what their core function is, we can take care of all that stuff behind the scenes.
Excellent. Pulling out your crystal ball, because, we know you have one. It's just a matter of looking into it. What are some of the biggest changes that you're seeing coming on the horizon for 3PLs? Could be in terms of legislation, could be in terms of technology, could be in terms of any one of those factors that you were talking about that are both challenges and opportunities. What are you seeing on the horizon?
Well, Beth, I'm going to let Tim jump in on that because I don't know if anybody ever caught that, but my Siri on my watch thought I was talking to it. So if anybody heard that background noise, I'll just open up and let you know Siri was very interested in your question.
Excellent.
Yeah. So Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not going to claim to have a crystal ball, or I sometimes I claim to have a magic 8-ball, and every time I shake it, it says check back later, or try again later, whatever that little triangle is that pops up on that. But I think, the things facing our industry, I think they evolve with markets. I don't think we create them. I think the market kind of drives some of that, right? As Shelley kind of alluded to, we came from a very tight capacity market where there weren't enough trucks for the number of shipments or whatever the case may be, or enough capacity, generally speaking, to a market today that is all indications are where it's a little bit looser and softer, where there's plenty of capacity in a marketplace, but maybe not as much freight as we all want. So that equilibrium is typically short-lived in the middle of all that, and really it's I think what we try to do with data and the insights created from that data is to try and make some reasonable predictions on what's next. And where's the highs and lows, and how does that relate to these other initiatives that are by organizations, whether that's new products on a shelf, whether that is the sustainability we mentioned, whether that is expand a growing business or expansion of new warehouses or new footprints. And so we try to collaborate on those items. But I think the one thing that is for certain, whether it's today's market, yesterday's, or the one that's ahead of us, is the nimbleness of the third-party model will be able to adapt to what the market throws at us and hopefully smooth that out on behalf of the customer.
Circling back to sustainability, are there particular metrics that you are tracking in terms of sustainability to be able to talk about that quantitatively with customers?
I'm going to screw that up if I try and do it at a really big macro level. So I'll speak to two things. I'll speak very generally. I'm going to reference the railroads because many of the railroads have tools of an emissions output calculator and what that means for carbon tons, or I'm probably using the wrong language, but carbon output in the environment of truck versus intermodal for a certain length of haul or a certain lane. So I think there's tools like that out there where some of our participants of IANA, the railroad specifically, look at that and say, here's how we can help you and create line of sight as it relates to that tool. There are other third parties that have similar tools. I'll reference C.H. Robinson's tool very specifically, which is Emissions IQ. And Emissions IQ looks specifically at a customer supply chain and network and says, here is your carbon footprint, and here are the things that we can do associated to that. I don't want to make this about a Robinson commercial, but my point in saying all that is that there are many things available to our customers, and there are many tools that complement each other. One might have their own little nuance about or user interface, but they're largely geared towards the same thing, and that's to create awareness and to create a starting point, and then figure out a roadmap about what that means for each individual company on that outcome.
Yeah, Beth, I would say on our front, we do track it, but really it's more of a forward opportunity for us to educate our customers on sustainability. And so with all the tools that Tim mentioned, we are able to go and if our customers aren't currently tracking that in their internal environment, we help them with the tools to be able to do that. And that goes a very long way, because a lot of folks, if they're in, let's just say we're dealing with a transportation department, they aren't fully aware that their executive team and how important it is to higher up in their company. Mm-hmm. And once we start giving them the tools and giving them the education on that, it goes a really long way.
Absolutely. I can imagine that just being able to provide that information just helps the conversation move along, but it also makes your customer that much more informed and smarter and working with you to make better choices and to potentially talk about what the next innovations might be along the way too. So
Absolutely.
that's great too. So I want to talk a little bit about just past pandemic, post-pandemic. And I don't want to say that we are 100% post-pandemic, but I know a lot of businesses learned some things immediately during the pandemic about a lot of our employees can work from home and we can do that and that's sustainable. I'm curious if you've seen larger lessons that you've learned out of the pandemic that you can apply going forward with your businesses, and I'm not asking for any kinds of, secrets or anything like that, but just, changes that can be made and, things that you're looking at, improvements that can be made so that when there is another situation kind of like this, you're more prepared from a company perspective to deal with those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tim, I'll jump in and then you can definitely give all your insight. A very wise person, which wasn't me, said the other day, don't waste a good crisis. And I've heard that a couple times since then. And I really feel like that sums it up, is that, we did get into a situation, into a setting where we all couldn't believe that we could function a different way, and we all did. So I think that we did learn a lot from the pandemic in different ways that we can be efficient and be proficient and work with our organizations on just down to the daily level of how we execute and operate. But I will say on that is I think we've learned you can't take it too far one direction. So I think that we've also learned as we've gotten past the pandemic, at least in our environment here, is that there's value to a lot of the way we used to do it and the way it can be done now, and molding those two together. One of the things that I'll just, in our own environment here is just this simple, do you work from home? Do you work remote? Do you work in the office? What do you do? And we've seen internally here, and it can be different for every organization, but we've seen that you really need both. That you don't want to lose the in-office team environment and that connection with people, but you also don't want to lose the ability for folks to work at home and have that have that leisure and have that extra ability to just kind of work at home, go at it and make things happen versus dealing with the roads, dealing with the, all those different things. So if you do kind of that hybrid environment, which is what we've adopted here, I think you see a lot of benefits. And it's not just that we've all learned through the pandemic. That's just one thing that I, wanted to bring to light, but there's so many different things that we found just in the simple supply chain of how to move things differently. I think a lot of what we talked about in this session, and being flexible and being nimble and moving, we weren't that nimble prior to the pandemic, I don't think. We were forced to learn a lot of new solutions and a lot of different ways to do everything. Tim?
Nope. I'm not trying to step on that. Nope. That was all good here. I love it.
All right. Excellent. So here's a fun kind of question. Tim, I'll start with you. We'll see these stories occasionally on the news about, I don't know, an elephant is being moved from one place to another, something like that. I'm just curious, what is the most interesting project that you can talk about that you've been involved in at each of your companies and in your career?
Oh my goodness. The list is probably long and distinguished. I think probably the most fascinating thing I've been a part of, this is going back a few years, I'm not going to date myself, but it was over-dimensional cargo from a port. And really that, I think, is just to source the carrier that has the right permits and criteria and driver certifications to the roads you have to use and how you get point A to point B and the equipment that you need to get point A to point B for oversized over-dimensional cargo is It's a pretty fascinating part of the business. It's not necessarily the intermodal link to it as it came out of a port, but just the overall satisfaction that says you have this big, I got this, right? And what do I do with this? And being able to take this into action. I probably still have a picture of it somewhere buried on my computer in here, but because that's what we do sometimes, is take pictures and then talk about it forever. That's probably mine. Is
Cool.
That comes to the top of my brain here.
Excellent. Shelley?
So mine would be fairly recent. I guess fairly. It was right when the pandemic hit, and we were fortunate to be able to be working with a company that supplied all of the gowns, masks, and all of the essential items. And it came down. First, they called us and said that they were going to have one charter plane full of these essential items, and they needed to figure out a way to distribute it as soon as possible. Well, that one, and this was maybe like at 3:00 in the afternoon. That one plane turned into 66 charter planes, and we're going into all different airports, and they needed our help to get trucking to the airports, get the cargo off the charter planes, get them into a DC, break them, and then distribute them out to get them into the different locations like the nursing homes and those types of things. And it was an operation that we were fortunate to be a part of, not only just for the solutioning, the logistics, but just at the time to be a part of that and to be on the front end of it and helping other, just that feeling that you got to be able to help in such a time of crisis was really cool. But it was, our team here, and again, it was all about a team. We worked around the clock, like literally, we slept in different areas. We would in our houses because we knew okay, this person's up at 2 and they're on call, and this person's up next, and then and being able to, as soon as those cargo planes hit, and we have videos of this thing, and I just look at them today, and it's so phenomenal the way we lined the trucks up, and the big hatch of the big plane came up, and all these the cargo comes off, and to be able to see all those get distributed in a timely fashion. And we talk about the network and we talk about the people. I mean, we coordinated it, but our partners were phenomenal. And I think that is one of those times where, yes, you're getting paid, but it was beyond the pain. It was, or what you're getting paid. These people were just doing it. They were just doing it no matter what. They were all in, no matter what was going to need to take place. They were, whether it be the trucker, whether it be the warehouseman, all of our different partners that we were working with, they were just all in. And it was so cool to see.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. So thank you both for sharing that. We're getting to the end of the time. I just wanted to see if you had like any final thoughts you wanted to leave the attendees with today, and then we can go ahead and wrap up.
Well, I'll start. I'll let our chairwoman wrap it up for the session. But again, I just want to reiterate, thank you for having me on the time this afternoon and the opportunity to talk about what we do for a living, and invite the students and those that are new to the business to learn more about it and to build a network with us, as we need. The industry is always in need of great people and great innovators to keep moving us forward. So appreciate the time this afternoon or this morning, wherever you may be. And with that, I'll turn it over to Shelley.
No, I agree, Tim. And I as you guys can tell, we love this, right? We're passionate about it. It's not just a job. And that's what you really want, is something that you're so passionate about that you just get in there and you execute and you do what you got to do. And there's something new every single day. I would say that, for the students that are listening, definitely reach out. We want to help and promote anything we can to help guide your career path if this is something interesting. If you're not students, again, if there's anything that we've said here that's, you have further questions or struck something, reach out to any of us. That's, again, the cool thing is we are open and available for any questions, and we just love it. It's a great industry to be in, and we want to promote more people coming into our industry.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of IANA, I definitely want to say thank you to both of you for your time and expertise today. We really appreciate it. Just wanted to provide a little bit more information just really quickly about IANA for those of you who are familiar with the Operations, Safety, and Maintenance Business Meeting that takes place in May. Registration for that business meeting is going to be opening in February, so be looking for that coming soon. Future education sessions that are part of the Advancing Intermodal Virtual Education Program will be listed on IANA's website, so you can check those out. If you do want to reach out to us for anything, please feel free to email us at info@intermodal.org or visit us at intermodal.org. And again, thank you to Tim and Shelley for your time and expertise today. It was a great session. And we are looking forward to coming back and doing more of these sessions with IANA, the connecting force behind intermodal freight.